we've got a spotlight story to share. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show, the 1983 Gibson Les Paul Spotlight Special. One of my favorite models Gibson has ever done. Offered in 2 bass finishes, Antique Sunburst and Antique Natural, with shipping ledgers indicating at least 211 in existence. Although through finding duplicate serial numbers and additional units made in 84 and at least one in 85, we can confidently say it's somewhere between 200 and 400. These special guitars were handcrafted with Gibson Heritage Series tops that were just a little bit too short, so they slapped some walnut in between and created these interesting beasts. I like to document all the examples on my show. Here is the story of our latest one. So I was on Reverb one day, just scrolling through being happy, and I see the backside of a headstock with that natural yellowish grain fill and a custom shop edition stamp all zoomed in as the first photo, and I'm like, yep, that's a Spotlight. How much are they asking? $8,500. Okay, that's pretty high, but maybe we can make an offer. So I click on it and it just looks kind of beat up, but I threw an offer anyways because a Spotlight's a Spotlight in my opinion. They can't all be the minty case kept examples, and sometimes being player's grade can be a lot of fun. But I never heard back on my offer until about a week later. I get a message saying, hey, are you still interested? To which I responded and got the story. This was his father's guitar, and he had passed away about a year or so ago, and the family was finally coming to terms with selling off some of his collection. He had 3 or 4 guitars, he was a gigging musician. I don't know if he was the original owner of this particular one, but it appears he liked to play this one out. But before continuing with the purchase, I wanted to make sure, is the truss rod and neck still good? So he said, hey, this is actually at my buddy's shop. I just dropped it off to consign it, so I'll see if he can help with those photos. So he goes to the shop to ask them for the photos, and they get kind of upset with him that he's trying to sell it when they just gave it to him to sell, because they're showboating it on their Facebook page. They put a boisterous $10,000 asking price on it, without taking into account that they preferred a quick sale rather than something sitting. I love Spotlights, but if you're asking 10 grand for one, it's gonna sit nearly forever. And with the condition this one's in, it's just not there. So unfortunately, the deal went cold, but another 2-3 weeks pass. I get another message asking, all right, you ready to do this now? It's like, okay, let's do it. There were a few headaches with the whole shipping process, but I was able to help guide him. But let's go ahead and document my new Spotlight that came out of California. It's another Antique Natural, and yes, that is a beautiful one. I always love the crossed hatch wood grain pattern that these things have. Like, we got a lot of flame right here, but yet you still have the grain underneath. Now this one's really wavy. Sometimes it's like pinstripe, kind of checkerboard pattern. This one's looking like it's going to be pretty nice. The grain's a little bit different on that side, but hey, that's what makes Spotlights cool. So let's demummify this and get it out. So first off, a few weird things here. So our low E string is actually a nylon. That's not even going to work on this guitar. I wonder if he just put that on there because it's like all he had laying around and he's not necessarily a guitar guy. But knowing that this was at a guitar shop for $10,000, they didn't even restring it. That's a little funny to me. But it is an absolutely beautiful top here. But you're going to notice somebody has different pickups in here, or at least that's what you might think. So a lot of the Tim Shaw PAFs, if you take the covers off, they actually are double creams. So that's supposed to be the story here. However, I can tell just by looking at this, the neck pickup ring has been replaced. And when you get this in very unflattering lighting, you can see finish checking all over this thing. It's nowhere near as clean as it looks right now. I mean, check out all the strap wear along the edge. This is a played beauty, but I noticed straight out of the case, this is actually one of the lighter Spotlights I had. It would not surprise me if this is like 8.5 pounds. That's pretty good. We'll check all the detailed specs on the workbench. But this is an Antique Natural, so if you've never seen one of these before, what makes them so special is the fact that they have brown multi-layered binding. So it's brown and cream. You also have the double layer on the fretboard, which is really cool because you get that cream layer acting as like a purfling layer. And I can't think of another Les Paul that utilizes a system like this. Like the Les Paul is kind of similar, but they go even way fancier. And the Antique Naturals get this natural headstock. But this one definitely had some staining issues around the Gibson logo. It's not all that uncommon. But then when we get to the back of the headstock, we can find our serial number. So this one's a 1983 example, number 135. And it's got some extreme finish checking on the back of the neck. It looks like a stand at some point in time actually chipped up the finish right there. When I first felt that, I was like, oh no, it didn't break in transit, did it? Most Spotlights I've had have not been this heavily checked, so this is something definitely gigged. And we've got this like giant scratch down the back here. Not quite sure what that's about. Must have had like a huge belt buckle, and then we've got a big impression here. And when I first started collecting spotlights, I used to like to take them and restore them back to 100% original. But I've started to just appreciate the modifications that previous owners have done. Like at one point in time, this had different tuner tips on it because apparently he didn't want the original pearloid ones to go bad or something. But the previous shop put that on. I probably would have did the same thing. But I was told the pickup covers are in the case. We'll see. I think I'm just going to leave it as is because it's got a really cool vibe in and of itself. Besides the guitar, it still has the original case. Gen 3 chainsaw, brown interior. That's one of the accepted cases for the spotlights. It's got our Gibson badge still on the outside, but let's see what kind of case candy we've got in here, because there's a whole bunch of stuff. We have like a really old looking guitar center strap that appears to be made of real leather. Cool. If anybody knows the vintage of this, I'd be interested in knowing. It wouldn't surprise me if it's like 80s, but I have no idea. It doesn't feel like it's falling apart, so maybe it is newer, but it's just really cool to me. Looks like the owner utilized this style of strap lock system, very old school. And it saved our original strap buttons. And we've got some leftover older strings. That's probably where that weird nylon one came from. Nothing that's still usable. A Guitar Center pick. Which, by the way, it wasn't a Guitar Center that it was consigned at, so that's not why it has this stuff. Then a mystery baggie containing what appears to be the original pickups to this guitar. Nah, I'm just kidding. These are still humbuckers. However, I have no idea what they are. I don't really even see any markings besides like this 211. But it's got the nice braided wiring. I don't think these are cheap knockoff pickups. They might actually belong to something. So if you happen to recognize these and know what they are, feel free to let me know, as they clearly don't belong to this guitar, but there must be some sort of a tail here. Some sort of a weight compass looking thing. And then a spare set of the Schallers that were on here, so unfortunately no pickup covers, which is a shame. But overall, pretty cool example. So let's go ahead and throw it on the workbench, take a deep dive in it, get it super cleaned up, and figure out what all is original before we get to a playing sample of this double creamed one. 2 hours later, and now she's just an absolute beaut. I was really sad when I saw that there was like this big gouge in the center stripe, but thankfully that polished out. If you get it in the light, you can still see the light remnants of it. But that thing still needed a little bit of love, and now this top is just dancing. I love this side. It's just like the perfect 80s top. But when you come over here, it's that really nice wide flame that I like. And once you get all the gunk off, it allows more light to hit the top, and then you can just see everything. Unfortunately, disaster has struck here. We thought they were Tim Shaw PAFs. It's very common to find the double creams under the covers. I've seen spotlights like these that are original. However, no, they're DiMarzios. Here's a closer look at the markings. Made in USA. They appear to be slightly older, and they've got the black wire coming out of them. If I had purchased it from the shop that was consigning it and they told me it was all original and then I had DiMarzios, I'd be really upset. If I was buying this from somebody who knows enough about guitars to get around, I would probably ask for some money back to buy Tim Shaw's. In this situation, the son was helping the wife sell it. I'm not going to beat him up about it. I will ask them, hey, is there like a parts drawer somewhere that they might be in? I could have been tipped off previously by looking at these pole pieces. I had thought that they were just worn gold, but now that it's all nice and cleaned up, you can tell that they're chrome. So that would have told us they were non-original. Looking straight through here, you can see that brass base plate. Gibson did not use that. And in person, when you can see the color difference between the rings, that tells you something's probably been up there too. You can see this ring is bending and it'll eventually break. That's probably why that one was replaced. But hey, that actually makes this review kind of interesting because now we can demo a spotlight with some DiMarzios. But I'm far from an expert on those, but we get 7.57 k ohms in the bridge, 7.77 in the neck, in the middle, 3.83-ish, so they appear to be PAF-like. Inside our neck pickup cavity, we can see a couple of markings, like the Antique Natural one right there, but I've never seen this before, a nice little date. It nearly looks like it might say Dylan 62783. That's a marking I haven't seen in one of these before. We talk about the Leonard family, Randy Leonard and his father, Floyd Leonard, quite often, but there's other people that were making these. As far as our bridge pickup cavity, just our regular 3 stamping. But if you've been curious how thick the center piece is, it's just the same thickness as the top. Probably pretty close to 3/4 of an inch. You can also see that right there where the neck joins because we're utilizing a short neck tenon. And you know what? I've always said the spotlights are about the same width of the fretboard. However, if you really look, it is slightly smaller.
In 2007, Gibson reissued these, but they made them highly unattractive in my opinion, because they made the thickness like this thick. But at the same time, it makes them unique. If anybody's thinking of selling one of those for a realistic price, feel free to let me know. And the other thing I found while looking in here is someone at some point in time made a small goof when reinstalling the pickup ring. But now check this out. This was a nice surprise. Stock from the factory, the Nashville-style bridges did have these little black spacers on them, in the 80s anyways, so that was really surprising these were still there. Yes, this is currently still an original-style Gibson Nashville bridge. They were made in Germany by Schaller at this point in time. Now this bridge isn't too bad, but it is slightly collapsed. Probably should be replaced at some point for maximum playability, as well as for cosmetics, because both the bridge and tailpiece are pretty worn. They cleaned up nicely, no longer grimy feeling. This one's also original. Here's what the whole thing looks like without a pickguard. Most of them came from the factory without it even installed. It was just in the case, and then some madmen decided to put it on. I think it looks great like this, and I also think it looks excellent like this. It's really just the aging of the pickguard. Since it has been put on very early on in its life, it matches perfectly with your toggle switch and your switch cap, and the whole double cream thing just, transforms the vibe of this from super fancy antique natural to heavy rocker. Of course, don't forget, we've still got nicks and dings. It might look mint condition now, but it's far from it. It's got the finish checking. It's a character piece. And you also have some checking by the knobs, but nothing nefarious. This is one of my favorite parts of spotlights, though, the original UFO-style knobs. Gibson used these from, approximately 1980 through 1983, some early 84s before they switch over to the inferior style, in my opinion. I just like the UFO skirted shape that they have, and that dark amber top, very molassesy in color, and there's a little bit of sparkle here. Moving on from our two-piece maple top with the walnut center stripe and mahogany body, we've got a mahogany neck with our rosewood fretboard. We talk about these things having brown binding that's multi-layered. You gotta remember, this is based on a Les Paul standard, and standards only have single-ply binding around the body. That's what makes the Antique Naturals a little bit more special. They have the Odd Duck 4-ply binding, which you just don't find on many Les Pauls. And it really just helps make these things look a little bit more fancy. Another cool thing about the brown binding is you get light cream colored side markers. Obviously, I polished these frets up crazily nice. However, there's some pretty hefty fret wear on this thing. Does it need a level recrown? Probably. Are you going to have much frets left after you do that? Nah. Is it time for a refret? Not necessarily, but it would probably make it a better player. The brunt of the fingernail wear is mainly in your cowboy cord area. You must have been playing here quite a bit. But it's always a shame when you have to refret an Antique Natural because they have multicolored fret nibs, which is just awesome in my opinion. And there's also some fingernail marks on the fretboard. It was well used. We have a 1.73 inch nut width, which increases to 2.07 by the 12. First fret neck depth, 0.83. And since we're hitting the heel, we'll take it at the 10th, about 0.96. It's a little bit on the thinner side. You can actually find 3-piece neck spotlights. Those are typically the beefier ones if you prefer that. Here's a look at that neck profile, 1st fret and 12th fret, just a nice rounded C. And we do have some slight finish chipping right here by the fretboard, but that's not the kind that I'm worried about, like shipping trauma or anything. That's just from play and all the finish checking. The things that scare me about buying players' grade examples, sight unseen from somebody who doesn't know how to check over a guitar, is truss rod status, is the neck twisted, was it stored properly? We do not have any issues on this one, but it does show a cool phenomenon. So we do have a little bit of a shadow here, which means this thing has seen a lot of sun, but yet it hasn't like overly yellowed at the same time, but it has bleached some of the color out, so it looks a little bit lighter. Now that you know to look for it, you can also see that this was a darker color at one point in time too. The tailpiece shielded that, and the bridge a little bit. You don't find tan lines on spotlights too often. Now, unfortunately, with having a different set of tuners on here, there is quite a bit of finish chipping along the edges, and that's usually due to the pressure of the tuners, or somebody has over-tightened them. And I double-checked these to see where they were. They were over-tightened again, so I fixed that. Here's our cool Gibson logo. And if you think this is just a natural headstock, it's not. It still has a veneer over it. Otherwise, we would see the headstock wings. And if you look along the edges, you can see where they put a new piece of wood on top there. Now, the nut's probably been worked on, like the finish is chipped a little bit. And I'm betting this low E has been filed down too much. Because when I first got it, the bridge was like this, to the point where I thought the neck was twisted. So we'll have to see if that strings up okay. Now that it's all strung back up, in a surprising turn of events, with 11 gauge strings, the low E is fine. It's just the collapsed bridge that's causing a lot of buzzing. That's why somebody had it sloped all the way like that, to get rid of that. So when you strum the D string, it's pretty buzzy, but once you fret it, it's okay. I think that's how I'm going to leave the setup for now, because as long as you run that string just slightly outside of the slot, all the fretted notes are okay. Good enough for now, but the bridge should be replaced. That strap lock system he used really took a toll on the original strap buttons here. It's not just the plating that's worn off, it absolutely chewed them up from the pressure on it that it wore through to the base metal through the coating. And now we move on to the backside. Had we gotten this photo, those pickups would not have been a surprise at all. But here's the thing, getting somebody who's not familiar with guitars to take them apart, even if it's just 4 screws like this, is sometimes too big of an ask. But if you throw these shielding tins into the mix, these can be really tough to get out sometimes. Like, they're tight in the cavity. Sometimes getting them back in is even more of a pain in the butt. So you take the risk if you're with somebody that's not familiar. Surprisingly enough, we have 4th week of 1983 pots on the neck and bridge volume controls, and it looks like 12th week of 1983 on the tones. In this era, as long as these two and those two match, it's good, but a lot of times in spotlights you'll actually find 1980, 1983. But this one was not a Leonard family creation. Here's another thing that would cause this guy some headaches. I couldn't get the back plate back on. It's because the plastic has expanded. You want to go throw it in the freezer for like 5 minutes. It's going to shrink it just enough to fit back in. And here's a quick look at the toggle switch cavity. This doesn't look like it's ever been messed with, or even open. That plate was hard to get off. But our back cleaned up quite beautifully as well. This looks quite sinister, right? But it's more so just a buckle worming mark that for some reason got the grain fill all excited. I thought that was like a big gouge into the wood, but it's very light. Now, if you want a big gouge into the wood, that's right here. But when you get the light on it, you can see all the worming marks too. So, loved and cared for, but some freak accident is what that looks like to me. And then you've got one of them coily cables disfiguring your finish here, runs all across the guitar. But you have to be in the light to see stuff like that. Looking around the edge, you can see the maple cap exposed right there. Adds to your chocolatey, creamy goodness of these. You can see where something has sank into our finish checking to make it look darker there. See our golden output jack plate. And a quick look around here. Nothing too notable on this side. But you do have some cool ringiness to the wood grain in the neck, and the neck is definitely a darker mahogany color. Or it just didn't get as much yellow grain fill. Looking in there and comparing it to that, yeah, I think that's the case. Sometimes I think a player's sweat can go under the finish and like delete that. We've seen that on Vintage Deluxe, how oils can penetrate the finish like that, so it might actually be a phenomenon like that, but so much finish checking here. I was kind of scared to polish this one, because when I got it, it felt like a little bit brittle, like maybe it would continue to keep going, but I went to town on this thing, had no issues with that flaking off. That was definitely caused by like a capo or a stand, something that had an impact, which is really the worst thing condition-wise on this whole guitar. In fact, if you look over here, you have a matching impression. I would say that's some sort of a stand. And if you look at the wings, one's dark, one's light. Yeah, that stuff happens. There's our Made in USA stamp with serial number 83135, Custom Shop Edition, with our cool pearl tips to the Gibson Schaller M6 tuners. Guitars like these are always fun to blacklight. This will show you that not much of the finish was actually broken during that impression, but not such the case there. Back's looking pretty good. The edges, it doesn't look like the neck's ever been off or anything crazy like that, but we can see a few more dings and some impressions from a stand. I had some questions about this area right here. It looked a little bit funny in some of the photos he had sent me, but it just looks like a buildup of like sweat or something in that area, or dirt from the strap most likely. And this could either be a stand, like it just sat on different places in different locations. That's why it turns kind of like orangish color. Running up the neck, you can also see a stand mark right there. So that confirms it. It's one of those cheap Guitar Center style stands. And we can see our finish checking real good and our finish chip right there, but thankfully no breaks, cracks, or repairs to report. Headstock is looking fine. I didn't even notice that. The clear coat's missing off the binding right there. You can definitely feel the difference. There's just not going to be much of a color difference, so a few areas of that. And here's a closer look at that area I was talking about earlier. I'll stand by what I said on that. Now the face of the guitar, nice even glow. Might see a sticker shadow here that was like rectangular, but I'm not 100% sure on that. The knobs glow the way I want to see. Everything else looking good. And I was curious about this headstock. So you can see the chipping around the tuners a bit more clearly, but it looks like there's a minor impression by the Gibson logo from like a clip-on tuner. I was curious if we would see that. And you might go, hey, is that what caused the discoloration by the Gibson logo? No, that just happened on some of these. But now the weight. How did I do? It is a lighter one, 9 pounds, 1.3 ounces, but not quite the 8.5 I was thinking. Must be very well balanced, so the body doesn't feel like overly heavy. So now that we know everything about the history that I can teach you about this one and the originality of the parts, let's go ahead and plug this beauty in and hear how a Spotlight sounds with these DiMarzio PAFs.
I'd say it sounds pretty good. However, it badly needs a new bridge and maybe a little bit of fretwork here. It's really buzzy. I could raise it up a little bit, but then I think the action would become uncomfortable. So this is a little bit lower than the happy medium.
I did find an issue up here. 14th and 15th fret are the same. And it's mainly those middle strings that are buzzy.
But if you play the right chords, no one would ever be the wiser.
But the neck pickup is quite nice on this.
Very bright, articulate, and clear. Whereas the bridge is very thin, but I think that's gonna distort really well.
The bridge pickup's nice. But it's really the neck pickup, even on the dirty channel, that steals the show. Now that we know all about 83-135, what are my final thoughts? This needs some luthier help to play much better, but it sounds fantastic, the tones that we were able to get out of it. So I do have Tim Shaw PAFs I could throw in here, but it's just one of those times where it's like, you know what, it's okay as is. It still has an original vibe to it, and it's different from the other Spotlights in my collection. But I really like the top on this one. It's just insane after we've cleaned it here. The difference is night and day. But it's always great to document new tales on these spotlights, because I can understand why guys get like obsessed over bursts. You know, before they were expensive, they would buy so many different ones and like learn the tales behind them, because I feel the exact same way about the spotlights, and there's other people out there too. So that's why I like to document as many of these as possible. So Troglodytes, I hope you enjoy your newfound guitar knowledge. Do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next one. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.